Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 110 of the Zombie Train. Oh no, Under Construction. I'm your host, Ellis, otherwise known as the Admiral, and this week we are continuing our endeavors that we embarked upon many weeks ago. I was going to say last week, but really we've been doing this from the beginning. So, here we are. I'm going to do my best to focus on the grass around this area. At current, I need to fill in this field. And maybe towards the end of the episode we'll do some copy-pasting if I'm feeling particularly bold. But right now I'm going to shy away from that and just kind of hope the game doesn't crash. Now, it's worth saying that I did manage to, if you didn't watch the stream that I did manage to get 2019 to crash on me a couple times. It's also worth saying that I installed 2019. It's also worth saying that now I have 2 modules done. In the stream you saw me build 1. And now I have a second one completed. And I'm going to try some copy-paste shenanigans to finish a third relatively quickly, or rather relatively efficiently, because I don't know when exactly it's going to be done. But I want it to be done, sooner rather than later. We're getting modules in, and the first modules we get in, they're going to be able to pick their locations off the starting junction, or even if they want to be on the starting junction, maybe they can be the base tile on their own. But that is up to those individuals who finish their modules first. I opened it up to modules going in all directions with different numbers of tracks, so not just 2, you can have 4 or you can have 1. There were some issues with the locations of these tracks, and it is a little bit difficult to explain, and I did want to make a sort of version 2 system with the tracks that are, split between 2 tiles, instead of on the center of the edge of 1, because it's easier to find where that location is. Some very clever people figured out relatively easy ways to find it, but it's worth saying that it's not the easiest thing in the world, and some people got confused, and I sort of have been just pointing people at the live stream and saying, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, but it's not perfect because I did not set it up as a tutorial. I set it up as I'm going to hang out and build this module. So, yeah, could have been worse, could have been better. The live stream went relatively well. I was able to finish a module, more or less. I went back in and did some fiddly things, like adding an actual interlocking tower instead of just the box, and also adding speed limits and speed limit signs. Those were the 2 things that I neglected to do. And as well, like I said, I moved on to the next module, which is one of the straight line interlocking modules. So, yeah, it's the project on the whole has been coming along relatively well. Although we don't have any module submissions, I would have been pleasantly surprised if people had wrapped up theirs this quickly. And we have just been having piles of ideas. If you want to build a module for the Iron Horseman Modular Railroad, feel free to hop into the Trains Route Building chat in our Discord and come and talk about it, I guess. Because people need one-on-one training to build a module. So, anyway. That was a joke. With the information that's contained in the pinned post, building a module should be relatively straightforward. There's a lot of leeway now. As long as you line up your edges, that's really all you need to do. There isn't much else for an individual to do or for an individual to mess up. So, the edges, they need to be at 0. The tracks need to be at the center of the edge of a tile. That's kind of about it. There needs to be 4 or 2 or 1 of them. I suppose you could also get away with 3 if you really wanted to, but isn't exactly what I had in mind, and I don't think anybody's going for that right now. If you have 3 tracks, you can just terminate one of them, or break the other one out, so that you have 4 tracks. I don't know. That's my thinking. So that you have 2 or 4, I guess. And I am waiting to see how these things go together, and when we get new modules, I suppose I'll do little live stream updates of the modular railroad, and additionally, once we get enough modules, especially if there are commodities or passengers going between modules, or that would be going between modules, I will start doing AI work, which means I'll be moving into 2019 a bunch of content and a bunch of commands, and learning if there are any AI quirks that I have to figure out while I'm there. So I think it's going to be it's a good easing in instead of just dragging Tolbrand into 2019 and trying to troubleshoot it all at once. At least I'll sort of know what I'm getting into, especially with some of these modules that are coming up from previous versions, and I may encounter some of the same issues with them. I haven't used any of the cool grass or really any of the new stuff yet, but I am excited, looking forward to doing so. I intend to take advantage of these things on Tolbrand once I learn them, and once, of course, that we move up to that version. But that will come. The reason that I opted not to learn any of that stuff for the modules is that, according to Mason's experiments, the layers that the grass is on, for lack of a better term, they don't carry over when you merge roots. So there's little to no point to using them because you tend to lose them. That's unfortunate, but as a lot of people aren't building in 2019 anyway, I don't think we're going to be missing too much. None of the criteria say your module has to look good. It just has to be good. I also was thinking that I could do little impromptu module reviews when one gets submitted, and actually score these things, and then we'd have a best module. I would want to rework my scoring system. With the route reviews, of course, I'm keeping the scoring system static, even though it's not the best. Because it would sort of invalidate the scores that came before it if I would have to re-review them with under the new scoring system, or provide some sort of conversion, I guess. So yeah, I'm not too incentivized to do that because it would end with a lot more work for me. So I may keep the scoring system intact, that way I have a way to compare them. But I kind of want to make a module-specific scoring system. It would be very similar. It would have a lot of similar characteristics, but it would just swap out one or two different things. On the whole, I don't think I'm going to change it. If you guys want me to do that, then say something. I'll consider it more heavily if you guys want to see those, that content or whatever. But right now, I may do scoring. I may not film all of it, and if I do and don't film it, it's probably going to be under the same scoring system, so that I can categorize the stuff all the same. At any rate, at one point I did have all of the scores tied up somewhere in like an Excel document or something. I'm not sure what happened to that. Actually, you know what? I might have stumbled across it earlier, and now I don't remember. So, because I was rooting around in my Google Drive looking for a particular file, and I was looking for the folder where all the modules are going to go. I didn't remember where I put it. I put it in the same folder as all of the Iron Horseman scripts and stuff, so that, not necessarily the worst place to put it, but I realized I had a folder for route building competitions, so I decided to move it into there, and I feel like it's a little bit more appropriate. At any rate, I am, like I said, I'm excited to get these submissions and to tie these modules together and to embark on all of the logistical problems that these modules are going to present. Now, there is something that I am interested in attempting, and I really don't know how I would automate it, because, well, it presents a kind of unique challenge for automation, which is a ferry module, a car ferry module. And that's the kind of thing where it would be really neat. If you stick it in the middle of a main line, it would definitely hamper operations, but it could be really interesting. I don't know how you would justify it, but this is a modular railroad. Do we really need to? Yeah, I don't know. So, I've been thinking about doing that. That would be my module. If nobody else takes up the torch and decides to build that, after I get done all of the modules that I'm working on, I will probably embark on that as a module for myself. And then I'll score it, and I'll give myself a perfect 100. And then I'll put it at the top of the list and go, I told you could get a 100. Okay, maybe I won't do that, but point is, I'll make that module if nobody else does. So, anyway, let's diverge here. Actually, no, because the comments will always be there. I want to talk about things as I think about them. I tried something today that I had not tried previously. So, we had company over a few days ago, or a little while ago, I suppose. And, you know what, let's get rid of this, because I wanted to leave a little secluded beach here. And I booted up Battlefield 1 for the first time in quite a while. So, I, of course, then found the itch, the urge to play more of it, because it's a fantastic game. Of course, I don't really have time for that. But I also found the itch to do some more, like, actual exercise. And so I figured I have this stupid treadmill that took so much time to get into the house. And it's pointed at the television, which is where I wanted it, so I could play games on it. But I have heard not to play first-person games on a treadmill, because you get the idea that you want to speed up or slow down, or like step to the left or right, which that's even worse, while you're on a treadmill because you're running around in the game. Also, I'm like 25 feet from the television, which is not the ideal location for this thing, but I really couldn't find a better spot for it. So, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. I'm dealing. Either way, I went 18 and 18 in a game of operations on Battlefield 1 while walking on the treadmill 25 feet from my relatively mid-sized television. For the era that we're living in, what used to be called a huge TV when I was growing up is not that big anymore. So, and things are especially not that big when you're standing across the room from them. So, somehow I managed not to kill myself. I did almost go off the back of the treadmill once. Thankfully, there is something there that prevents me from going off the back of the treadmill. The bad part of that is that something is one of the speakers for the surround sound system, and it's relatively large and relatively old, and I kicked it kind of hard. It still works, thankfully. I guess they're pretty hardy speakers, but I see more of that in my future, that's for sure. Hopefully not too much more, but more. Yeah, it's a definite. I'm definitely kicking the hell out of that speaker in the future. I don't want to, it's going to happen, because I did notice myself speeding up and slowing down. Now, how did I go 18 and 18 while across the room from my television on a treadmill? The answer is this awesome thing called the MG15NA with the bipod and the scope. This thing has like 200 rounds in a magazine, and it's dope. I plopped that thing down. I was a defender on operations, which is basically the best thing I could have possibly asked for. And it wasn't the best map for it, but it definitely wasn't the worst. It was, Conquer Hell, I think. No, was it Conquer Hell? No, it was, Kaiserschlatt was the operation. Which is, the attacking team is German, the defending team is British, and it's the Germans pushing in at the end of the war into France. It's their last push. And we lost, unfortunately. No thanks to me for that lack of victory, because, well, I didn't do well. I was relatively high on the team for how well I did or didn't do. 18 and 18, I mean, it's quite a handful of kills, but it's also quite a handful of deaths. I typically don't do great. 1-to-1 is about as good as I can ask for in terms of kills. But that said, the fact that I got about as good as I could ask for while standing 25 feet away on a treadmill is pretty good in my eyes, and I was pretty surprised that I did as well as I did. You know, you're halfway through the game and you're thinking, wow, you know, I haven't died as much as I typically expect to. This is interesting. Like, maybe I'm actually going to come out of this with a pretty good score, and I was pretty pleased with myself at the end there. So, I did come out with a pretty good score as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, like I said, we lost, though. We lost pretty hard. They didn't even spend their first battalion trying to, you know, taking that first map, the one where they've got to get out of the trenches, which the beginning of that is pretty tough. It's not the toughest operation in my opinion, but it's not easy by any means. Actually, you know, I will say it's pretty balanced, maybe. Maybe it does favor the attackers, I don't know. Maybe I haven't played it in a while. I remember it being kind of a pain. I do remember defending on the map also being kind of a pain, at least on the first couple of sectors, but I remember having success with it. You know, you do a lot of running back and forth, but I remember having success with it. And I know that I have watched the attacking team get held, at least through their first battalion, fully on that map, and then they get the dirigible and they push forward a couple more points. I have definitely won without them leaving that map. I know that for certain. So, anyway, I was just pleased with my performance, and I wanted to share that with the world, because that's what I do here. I share my things with the world. So anyway, the moral of the story is, maybe take Bernie's advice and don't play first-person shooter games on our treadmill, but I seem to be okay at it, for now. Anyway, I got through like an hour and... No, I got through about 40 minutes and only kicked the speaker once, so that's a pretty good record on my part. I almost stepped off the treadmill a couple of times, but that's unimportant, because I didn't step off the treadmill. I almost kicked the speaker a great number of times, but I'm not going to count the almosts. So anyway, I don't think this should be this track. I'm just saying. Yeah, I kind of wish this was rustier track, but whatever. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So, yeah, that's my story for today. And I wanted to get to, because Brady Cure and I have been going back and forth now for 2 or 3 episodes. And he has one thing which I think is a very good point and is important to bring up whenever you're talking about the success and failure of political, not political necessarily, but political in some cases. What we're talking about is economic systems, communism, capitalism, whatever. In this case, we're talking about communism. So he says, the idea of communism is valid, but it has always failed because of greed, a thing that is part of human nature. Indeed, greed is what makes the world go around. As George Carlin says when he's dissecting the Ten Commandments, he says, you know, don't covet thy neighbor's goods. Coveting thy neighbor's goods is what makes the economy run. You know, it's important, especially in a capitalistic society, to desire things and to have greed and to want to move up in the world. You know, that I think is one of the biggest failings of, you know, that sort of communism that was employed in the USSR is, you know, I won't say communism, I won't whitewash it because I don't want to whitewash, or not whitewash, generalize is the right word. Whitewash? So we're talking about economics and racism now. Now, one of the biggest issues with, like, the kind of thing that was employed there, which, I mean, is somewhat necessary in that form of, if you want to employ a communist system in that era, you pretty much have to do state-given jobs, and that's not the most radical thing. These days, yeah, it depends where you are. But to the point of what it is, and you know, if you are basically guaranteeing everyone an income, you have to guarantee them a job, or at least you have to have people placed in jobs, you know, because you need your economy to run, not just... Right, and you need your economy. not just from the point of, oh, people have money, they're going to buy things, because that becomes kind of irrelevant in that system, which, again, I think is a huge failing of communism, or at least that brand of it, because then people have nowhere to put their greed aside from more power instead of more things. You know, when everyone gets paid the same, give or take, then you can't get a better car than your neighbor, etc. That's the metaphor that I've always heard of the analogy. Then it makes it difficult to placate, whatever, people. Because you're losing one of humanity's driving forces, which is the desire, which is greed, the desire to have more. But anyway, yeah, no, I absolutely think you hit the nail on the head with that, because, and delving deeper into it, like I said, if you remove the ability for greed to be expressed through objects, then the only greed that you're left with is power. Money and power, power and money. Cut out one of them, you're just left with the other and more force. So that's how you end up with that. Not it's how you end up with, but it's definitely pair to or complementary to a very authoritarian system, where you move up by question mark, because people want to hold on to their power, so they do whatever they can in their power to do that. I don't, I can't name every country that's tried a communist or capitalistic system. Of course, I don't expect anyone, a communist or socialistic system. To name the list of ones with capitalist systems would be very long, but I'm saying ever. Because it's interesting to look at the circumstances under which those things arose, and then what became of them. A lot of the time, it's used as a buzzword, like I said last episode. I won't revisit that topic, but, that's neither here nor there. So, to get back to what I was saying, quote, the idea of communism is valid, but it has always failed because of greed, a thing that is part of human nature. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. All systems, in general, if you come up with something and it works on paper, it works on paper. There is no guarantee that it will survive contact with the real world, with the outside world. Once you put people in it, people always talk about the ideal of communism being this, what's the term? Fully automatic luxury gay space communism. That's, I kid you not. You can look that up. That is I guess you could call it a phrase instead of a term, but it is supposedly the ideal. It is the, fully automated, as in you don't have to work, everything's done for you. Not as in you don't have to work, as in your services are provided for you. Yes, that, but also you don't have to work, as in the world around you will operate fine without your necessary participation. Like I was saying, in the USSR, largely before automation that we know today, you had to not just give people jobs, you had to force people into jobs, because, people aren't going to necessarily want to do the things that people don't typically want to do. The things that typically pay higher in other countries because people don't want to do them, so they're scrounging for individuals to fill those roles. The things that people don't necessarily want to do, you now have to assign people to, because, well, nobody's going to volunteer, so, whatever. And you have to have people that monitor those people, because they are not volunteers, and they're not doing this because they want to, they're doing this because they were told to, and that's where things start to fall down. Now, communism works on paper. It hasn't worked, not only because of the situation with greed, I would argue, but because we are not at a point where it is sustainable yet. Not to be fully communistic, that to make that full leap into whatever that entails. fully automated luxury gay space communism. Fully automated, like I said. Next word is luxury. Okay, so the first part is the world will go on without your input. The second is you're living in what's effectively a post-scarcity society, where you can have whatever you want on call. Or close enough to. Imagine Amazon, but you don't actually have to pay for it. You go on there, you click one-day shipping, and you get whatever you need. Not talking about the quality of the product, but luxury as in things are provided to you at effectively no cost to you, and all you need do is ask. That is the luxury portion. You can live out your life in luxury, not necessarily being waited on hand and foot, but maybe with robots or volunteers, ? In this hypothetical future society. And, but at least having your needs met. Food, water, shelter, all that jazz. And if you're post-scarcity, there's no reason to not make those things kind of nice. Instead of just having Soylent every day and living in, glorified dormitories, I guess. So, that is fully automated luxury. Gay being you're just free to do whatever you want sexually, isn't it? That's probably the most amorphous term there, because it just speaks to the idea of sort of breaking free of the typical gender roles and this, that, and the other thing. I mean, it's just a term that was thrown in there, probably to be funny, first, because there are other words that you could choose, but also to speak to the idea that there are no longer roles that define us. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. If I'm going full English teacher, somebody can say something. But, we didn't finish filling this in. Oops, that was my mistake. Or was this whole portion going to be trees because it's lumpy enough? Oh yeah, it definitely was. Fully automated luxury gay space. I mean, technology. That's pretty straightforward. Does it mean we're like an interstellar civilization? Does this mean we're living in, Roddenberry's vision for the world of Star Trek, which effectively is not the epitome of this term, but it gets close. They're living in a post-scarcity society generally without most traditional gender roles, barriers, etc. Pretty much everything is done by volunteer or by robot. So, space, communism. I mean, that's just we're adding all of these adjectives onto the word communism. I don't think I need to explain that part. But that is the hypothetical ideal. Now, what do we think of the world today and the way that we're going? If we look at, I've been trying to pay attention to, you guys have heard me talk about the Democratic debates and yada yada yada, and my thoughts on certain candidates, and oh my god, so much to say. But the reason that I bring that up right now, current politics, is because they're talking about things, or at least some of them are. Some individuals there are talking about things that are relatively forward-thinking and step towards this paradigm ideal. Not necessarily in the typical fashion, but in a fashion more suited to the life we're living today. Like a stipend, universal basic income something. That's the first one that comes to mind because that is the biggest thing there. It's sort of the elephant in the room, if you ask me, because we're moving towards an era where, I don't know when it'll happen, but we're moving towards an era where jobs are going to be getting more and more scarce, not because we have a depression or because the economy is slowing down, but because suddenly humans need not apply. And if you haven't watched that video from CGP Grey, I would recommend it heavily. because, and the reason I come around to the ideas that I like to talk about is because when you look at the immediate future, within most of our lifetimes, what are we going to do with all these people? I mean, we've got the baby boomers retiring now, but that's really neither here nor there. What about all the people, what about the Gen Xers that are going to be out of a job? Because suddenly, and interesting stat, trucking is okay, I'm vaguely recalling some numbers here, but it's something like a top 5 job in a couple dozen states at least. I might be underselling that. I remember it being like it's the number 1 job in 30-something states, which seemed completely absurd to me. Which is why I'm not repeating it, because I don't think I'm remembering that right. But it's up there. Point is, it's up there. And as we move towards self-driving vehicles, truckers are going to be the first people to go. I mean, it's going to be bus drivers, taxi drivers, and that means you, Uber and Lyft drivers as well, and then truckers. Maybe not necessarily and then, but it's just going to happen. When a car can navigate a street on its own, and can go get gas, or charge, I guess, on its own, like with the Tesla F.A.L.G.S.C plug-in thing that bends on its own and plugs itself into your car, which is creepy. But once they can do that, then suddenly we have no more use for drivers anymore, at least not for most companies and people. Once the automated car can pick you up, and yeah, there's going to be a hell of a transition period, but once that happens, I bet you anything Uber is going to be like, yeah, we don't need drivers anymore, we're just going to field these cars. They already have on order automated cars from Tesla, if I recall correctly. I remember reading that a while ago. That may not be true still, but it was like a standing order for something like 25,000 cars that, basically when Tesla says, yeah, they're fully autonomous, we don't need an operator anymore, Uber was just going to buy them. It was just going to go, yeah, we're going to buy we have them on order. When they're ready, we will purchase them and we will use them. And I think right there, you're looking at the future of the ride-sharing industry. It is no longer ride-sharing, it is auto taxis. Or as CGP Grey likes to call them, autos, which I think is a clever name for an automated car. Just as the horseless carriage has become an out-of-date term, I think the self-driving car will do the same. And replacing it with just the word auto, although in some countries auto is synonymous with car already, and is in the modern lexicon, not like, yeah, of course it is, because it's short for automobile, but like people use it. Yeah, okay, so it point is, it would be tough to convert people over to that in those countries. Maybe it will just sort of transition. Not important. So, looking to the future, we are staring down the barrel of a massive paradigm shift in the industry of transportation. That includes roads and rails. It possibly includes even aircraft. I mean, right now, the pilot and co-pilot, yeah, they're super important, but they really don't do much for most of the journey. The autopilot handles that because, let's be honest, you have to fly in a dead straight line for hours and hours and hours. That's boring as hell. Any individual is going to lose their mind if that's what they have to focus on. So, the pilot and co-pilot, yeah, they pay attention to all the gauges and readouts and communicate with towers and, look at the air traffic around them and check weather forecasts and stuff like that. And it's the computer's job of keeping them on the straight and level. Which makes sense to me because, well, wouldn't you be bored? I don't mean to discredit the job of pilots here, because of course they're very important and they handle things like takeoff and landing, which are, yeah, kind of important when you're dealing with a plane. But for most of the time, they're not doing a whole lot. It's sort of like the fireman on the Mount Washington cog. Yeah, he's really important to get you up there, but on the way back down, what is he doing? He's sitting in the back. He's leaning on his shovel going, isn't this the life? Meanwhile, the engineer is trying to make sure you don't fall off the track. And the brakeman, too. Recall that the brakeman controls the brakes for the coaches because the engine cannot stop the engine and coach. It doesn't have enough braking power, and also they aren't connected. So, there's that. If you ever ride the Mount Washington Cog, take the steam engine up. It's an experience. It's awesome. Anyway, so we're moving towards a world where the driver will be obsolete. And that, it makes my life kind of boring, because I kind of like driving. Not to say that driving will be illegal, although I can picture a day in the distant future, maybe not in our lifetimes, where actually driving your own automobile, particularly if it's a gas-powered automobile, on the streets is illegal. And you have to go to special places to do that, tracks, etc. Because, boy, would that be dangerous. It's sort of, think about it if you could just fly a plane, or a helicopter even. If helicopters were inexpensive enough that everyone could buy one, and you could just park it in your driveway and fly off with it every morning. The kibosh would be put on that so quick, because there's no way that you're going to let people just tripes through the air like that. People are bad enough in 2 dimensions, let alone 3. This is why we're never getting a flying car. At least not not a person-driven one, not a human-driven one. The person may be an AI. I don't want in order to make sure that I get to survive the robot takeover, I'm going to make sure that I refer to AI as people and not say robot necessarily. So, automated cars are great, and I'm looking forward to them, and I'm looking forward to meeting the first one that is able to communicate with me and have a conversation, and I expect to make friends with it and all of its friends. And I will pledge my service to the robot regime, and all that jazz. I hope they are listening to this in the future. Anyway, I hope everyone in the audience also agrees with me, because if you don't, bad things might happen to you. Anyway, speaking of bad things that might happen to you in terms of AI, once we have robots that can fight wars for us, this is going to be another game changer. Like, we're looking at, I know, okay, Skynet, Terminator, I know your red flags, alarm bells are going off, but let's be honest. Would a military not jump at the opportunity to not have someone killed, just in the same way that a trucking company would not jump at the opportunity to not pay somebody? Like, it makes sense, We live in a mostly capitalist world. Money matters, and lives matter too, so when it becomes cheaper to field an automated truck as opposed to a dude driving one, I get the feeling that trucking companies will suddenly lose a lot of employees. And similar to railroads, as a matter of fact, we're currently going down with this thing about one-man crews versus two-man. And what does that entail, and what does it mean, and why is it happening right now? Well, it's happening right now because PTC is getting to the point where maybe you don't need a second guy in the cab to keep an eye on things. Maybe just one dude to basically keep an eye on the PTC, or the PTC to keep an eye on him. Maybe that's enough. And I'm not going to state whether or not I agree with that, but I will say that certainly from a railroad executive's point of view, it makes a lot of sense. It would save a lot of money and a lot of man hours, and if the technology is getting good enough that can be relied upon, not really sure if we're there yet, but if the technology is getting good enough that it can be relied upon, then I guarantee you many people are going to jump at the chance. Of course, they're being hindered by laws, by worker protection laws that are cropping up in states here and there that say, yes, you must have two-man crews when you come through the state. Now, I think that's going to have one of two effects, or maybe a little bit of both. You're going to have crew stations on the edge of the states, which will then, provide crew from that state, an extra crew member for the train passing through that state. Either that, or you're just going to see a lot of trains avoiding that state. Now, if enough states get on board, then it's going to be difficult to do version B, but I guarantee you that the railroads will be taking advantage of point A as much as they can, because they'd be stupid not to. It's greed. It's greed, and that's how businesses run. I find it very difficult to fault a business, no matter what that business is, for just trying to make more money. Sure, it's unethical, but it is what they're supposed to be doing. It's not like they're, if they aren't breaking the law, then it's not wrong. That's not necessarily true, because there are plenty of things that are ethically wrong, but still against the law. Like cutting through a parking lot at a corner instead of waiting for the red light to turn. Just kidding, I'm pretty sure that's illegal too. I just wanted to say that was unethical, because I don't like it when people do that in front of me. So, a lot of the things that are unethical are also illegal, but that doesn't mean they all are. So, but just numbers-wise, I just find it hard to say, yeah, you are in the wrong because you're trying to do the thing that you're supposed to be doing, which is to make money. Now, a company's mission statement may not be, we want to make money, but in order for a company to survive, they kind of have to. So, it's difficult to say one way or the other what is the right way here. But I think that ultimately, no matter what the right way is, there will be an abolition of two-man crews at some point across most areas of most major railroads. And following that, who knows how long it will be until we see the abolition of crews at all. Might happen within our lifetimes. Probably will, honestly. I can see the automation boom happening easily within our lifetimes. So, yeah. Are you ready? Because I don't know if I am. I mean, I'm ready to befriend our new robot overlords and work for them, but I'm just not sure if I'm ready for it mentally. I don't know. Things are going to get weird, is all I'm saying. So yeah, that is the summary, or the long-form version of the ultimate question in my eyes, which is, what are we going to do with all these people now? All these people that are suddenly going to be out of a job, that have no marketable skills otherwise, that just exist, and they can drive, and that's good, but you can only, I don't want to use the term re-educate because of reasons, but you can only provide a new education, which is the same thing but in longer words, but it's not the word re-educate, so that's better, to so many people before you just run out of jobs to give them. And what are we going to do? Tell everyone to be a barista? Well, that's going to go out of style. What are they, you just walk up to a glorified coffee machine. That's what the barista of the future is going to be. And then, go to a Panera Bread. You don't even have to talk to a person to order. You don't have to talk to a person at all. You take the thingy, you punch your order in the machine, or vice versa, other way around. But you punch your order in the machine, you take the thingy, you go and sit down, or just go and stand around aimlessly, like I tend to do. And then, that second part, that doesn't have anything to do with Panera. I just stand around aimlessly a lot. I typically do so for about 8 hours a day. It's called my job. I'm kidding. I sit down at my job. You go in there, you punch your recipe. It can be a recipe. You can customize your stuff. And then you go stand around, and the thing vibrates, and you get off with it, and then you go and pick up your food. And that's it. You prove that you are you, or I guess they ask you if you are you. They'll be like, Donna? And I'll be like, yeah, because I used my mom's account. And they'll kind of give me a funny look, but that's kind of why I don't want to talk to them in the first place. So I'll get my food, and then I'll pretend to not exist at a table for a little while. And then I will leave and go back to my cubicle and be depressed. Anyway, that's my life. No, so what I'm saying is, restaurants, you can see them already moving past people in a lot of cases. You know, I can imagine at a restaurant like that, you have severely cut down on the number of people that you need to have taking orders. Because the kiosks, I mean, they might even be faster than a human in some cases. And they're less prone to mistakes. The person's entering their order, nobody's going to write it down wrong. I mean, I've had mess-ups in the kitchen, but on the receipt it still said the right thing, so it wasn't the machine's fault. So, also, if you go into a supermarket, you have the little robot that goes around and tells you if the stuff's spilled. That's taking the place of a person, too. You don't have nearly as many people out wandering the aisles, stocking shelves during the course of an average day, because you don't need them out there to keep an eye on if there's a mess. You know, think about it. These are your handymen in Roller Coaster Tycoon. Imagine if you were always looking over your park for vomit, and when you saw a vomit, you would just grab a handyman and drop them on the vomit. Now, I'm sure if you're playing Roller Coaster Tycoon and you're being very good about your park, either you don't have any because you've been very good, or when you do notice vomit, you do grab a handyman. That's if you really care. If not, they'll get to it eventually. But if you have more of them, they'll get to it even less eventually. And if you're not paying attention. But if you are paying attention, you could even just have one or two and just always have their windows open and just yourself be looking over the park and go, there's a mess, clean it up. There's a mess, clean it up. You could be all over that. And that's what this robot is doing. This robot is playing little overlord, and it's telling the staff, which really don't have to do much but sit around and wait for something to go wrong now. I mean, not saying that's what they do, but I'm saying that's all they have to do. All they have to do, not have. I mean, it's the same word, but it carries a different connotation. I'm not saying, whatever, never mind. I'm sure you get what I mean. They have more to do, but there is less that they need to do. They have more that they could do, maybe. Whatever. I'm being overly pedantic over something that I said. Anyway, the situation is they're cutting out employees. I've gone on this for like 45 minutes now, so... no. I mean, the episode's only about 45 minutes long, so whatever. If you guys are interested, you're interested. If not, you're not. I mean, I like to have this back and forth with Brady, but obviously it could happen in a less public forum. That said, that is what the show is for. Talking to you guys. So, to come around to a second comment, because we're there, it is very possible to blame it on communism, because communism, especially in the USSR, ran on the fear of not making your superior happy, because it could lead to death or a life of misery. I mean, it depends who you're making unhappy. But I see where you're coming from. I still don't necessarily want to blame that on communism itself, on communism on principle, but it's definitely true in the USSR. I can't fault you there. Things were not peachy. I mean, of course, the Russian authorities have said that they are going to make a series of Chernobyl of their own, which is going to show the real truth and not what what Netflix is showing, which is just lies and scandalous slander. So, obviously, once that comes out, we will learn how great life in the USSR was. And, yeah, okay, we won't. It was so not great that when, I believe it was Gorbachev or Khrushchev came to visit the US, he thought we were just making stuff up for him. Like going through a supermarket and seeing, speaking of supermarkets, going through a supermarket and seeing all of the different brightly colored products for sale. He thought that was just fake, that things couldn't possibly be this, I don't know what the right word is, rosy, cool. Those aren't really good terms for this. But this diverse and this vibrant is a better word, maybe, in the U.S., because, I mean, let's be honest, we were led to hate each other. We were led to believe that if you grew up capitalist, or in a capitalist country, generally, at least in our lifetimes, or in the lifetimes before ours, you were led to believe that communism is an evil virus of Satan, and vice versa. You know, capitalism is the worst thing that could possibly happen because it turns men's souls black, and you know, whatever you want to call it. There's no perfection there. They're both just systems, but you know, at the end of the day, it's all about the people in them, and the USSR was not. Not to say that the US was better, but we're talking about the USSR specifically here. I don't want to sound overly biased. The USSR was... I mean, for the average citizen, it wasn't terrible. I mean, the thing is, and then it got worse, but, I mean, generally, there are the jokes, but generally, your stuff was taken care of. But it wasn't great by any means. Now, if you compare the middle class in the USSR versus the middle class in the US at the time of, like, the 50s, then, not really. You know, the Soviet Union, and things didn't necessarily improve from there. I mean, globally they didn't, in general, but, you know, with the Cold War and everything, people tend to look back on the 50s in the US and that era as a pretty rosy time, the 50s and early 60s, and then, of course, life totally changed in the late 60s with the development of LSD and marijuana, because they weren't around before then, as we know. I'm not sure about LSD. Obviously, marijuana, the plant, has been around for plenty of time. But anyway, I'm just pointing to the cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s. So, I don't feel like I really needed to explain that. I'm sure you guys knew what I meant. But I do like to spell things out because I am a mansplainer at heart. So, you know, you can get on me all day long about that. We've gotten so much grass done, but that's all we've gotten done, and I apologize that this is boring, but it's what has to be done. So, we are pretty close to getting done with the grass, so I'm kind of... Like, I just realized that I'm being incredibly boring and also am incredibly bored, because, oh my god, there's only so much grass a person can take in their lifetime. So, let's change gears here, let's do shrubs instead. Anyway. We live in a society that does bring a lot of importance to making your boss happy. I mean, in most places you can get fired for any reason or no reason at all. Mostly the no reason. It's not quite as free as any reason. They can't fire you because you're black or something. We fixed that one a while back. But, at least in most places. In the US. Pretty much everything I'm talking about is going to be US contextual. So if you're out of the US and you're like, that doesn't make any sense, that's probably why. And for people that are wondering how this, you know, how to make it relate to your country, a yard is about a foot. So, a yard is about a meter. Not a yard is about a foot. A yard is 3 feet, so a foot is about a third of a meter. So, you know, if you're wondering on the conversion for what I'm talking about to what you understand, that's it right there. And also, let's see, what's another good one? I mean, a kilogram is 2.2 pounds, I think. So that's, you know, that way you can interpret it to your local language. Sorry, had to make the joke. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that life in the Soviet Union was rosy for particularly anybody involved. Even if you were at the very top, because then you're under a lot of pressure, and especially if you're there at Stalin's time, because then you've got him breathing down your neck about whatever. Because, like I said last episode, the man was paranoid, and that is why he did a lot of the things that he did, Not because they made any sense, and I'm talking about specifically his dealings with other individuals, not like the 5-year plan and stuff like that, because I think technologically he didn't do a terrible job. He did, him and I suppose Lenin, who came before him, did a relatively good job of modernizing Russia, because if you look at Russia in World War I versus Russia in World War II, there's a pretty stark difference there. And I'm not even talking about, like, the general stark difference of, well, the world has changed in the last 20 years or so. I'm saying, like seriously. You know, finally we have all this tech, and built to a level that's on par with the rest of the world. That was kind of unprecedented. That was pretty impressive for a nation that, during World War I, had... It simply was not on par. What they had on their side was men. And they had that in World War II as well. But a T-34 could more or less go toe-to-toe with a Tiger, or a... not any T-34, of course, but like a T-34 with the 85. You know, some of the later models, and even then, some of the early models of tanks they put out, the Germans struggled with. You know, they thought life was going to be a lot easier for them because, I mean, Russia is backwards, technologically inferior, and for a long time they were, absolutely. But they really got their act together. And that's something I've got to give Stalin and Lenin and the others in the hierarchy of the Soviet Union in its earlier years credit for. And they tried to be on the forefront of it, but that's unimportant. The Soviet Union was definitely a place under control of a very authoritarian individual, especially under Stalin, and was... You didn't want to screw up. You didn't want to screw up in the eyes of the country. Now, what does that have to do with communism? It's kind of a good question. I did make the correlation earlier that when you cut out the ability of people to envy other people monetarily, and to beat them monetarily, the only thing they have left is power. And so you're left with people wanting to hold on to every power they can, because when you retire, you don't get to retire to a life of luxury. You get to retire to a relatively mediocre, or mediocre for the Soviet Union, life. Because that's the life that kind of everybody has. It's nothing special. Even if you've lived your life in a relatively high position to the average Soviet citizen, it's not much to write home about. You don't really get much extra unless you're really in the high echelon. And so, people that did relatively important jobs wanted to keep those jobs. I mean, obviously for fear of getting in actual trouble because they screwed up their jobs and had to get fired. But also because that was what they had. You know, you were proud of your job, if you were proud of your job. You were proud of your job because that's the thing that you did that was relatively unique, you know? So, because they had bars on, you know, they had bans on religion to an extent, and, you know, there's not much way to maintain your uniqueness otherwise. There just wasn't a lot of variety available. So your uniqueness was tied to your job. You don't want to screw it up. The dude over you doesn't want you to screw it up because they don't want to lose their job because they didn't do right by you. You know, typically it didn't happen to just one person. Stalin was very famous for his purges. And I act like those were a good thing. They were not. And so you're left with people that really, really, really don't want to screw up. Because of the pressures that communism has put on them, but also the pressures of the authoritarian state of the Soviet Union. Those I would argue, are two very independent things. Because you can have a authoritarian state that is capitalistic. I mean, maybe it drives people there less. I feel like it would be interesting to compare them side by side, but that would be a hell of a social experiment, and I feel like it would not fly under a lot of codes and international regulations that say you can't do that to people, especially if they don't consent. Think like Stanford prison experiment stuff. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up, but be warned, it's kind of disturbing. It's basically when people are given power, I won't say it proved, because there's a lot of debate that goes on around it, but it showed an example of people given power, and even with just a bare amount of encouragement, or sometimes even no encouragement at all, they would turn into animals. And because once you hold absolute power over somebody, especially if there is no check on you, there is nothing stopping you from going full Seven Deadly Sins. So, I was just going to say greed, but there's way more than greed in there. So, yeah, it's worth a consideration. Did communism, as a system, have a hand in the authoritarian nature of the Soviet Union? I feel like is the title of a really great research paper, and we could break this down all day long. And I would love to hear people's opinions about this, so we can discuss them further. If you're totally bored of this, then maybe don't post an opinion on it, but I feel like I've at least turned somebody's gears. Brady, I'm sure I've turned yours a little bit, because we've been going back and forth on this, like I said, for a couple of weeks now, so we're both invested. And I've got to say, I love this thought process, and I hope I am doing a decent job of trying to look at all the different sides of this thing, because obviously I am on this show by myself. I don't have anybody here with me most of the time, and I definitely don't have the people that are posting these comments here with me basically all the time. So this is the perfect opportunity for me to grandstand and soapbox about this, that, and the other thing, and you are free to tune me out or turn me off, of course. But at the end of the day, if you want to watch this content, you are here. I mean, this amazing content where I'm placing grass for 2 hours straight. You come here to listen to an extent, because that's how you hear me go, oh no, when I play something wrong. Look at all this friggin' grass, though. I'm sorry I'm not doing anything else, but damn, look at this grass. It's got to get done, but holy macaroni. Uh-oh, what is this? Check this. Check this. Check this. Sorry, never mind. I hope I'm doing a decent job of at least trying to show that this is not at all one-sided, and not just harping on about what I think. I'm trying to draw some conclusions here, and I'm trying to be at least moderately scientific about it, if you can call it that. If you guys think I've gone wrong or astray, you're very welcome to point it out and to say something about it. Now, I am no Soviet expert as well. Most of the things I say have come from just things that I've heard over the years. And then in the US, there's a pretty heavy circle jerk against the USSR for obvious reasons, like I said. That doesn't mean it's unwarranted in a lot of cases, but it is still a echo chamber, is a more kind word than circle jerk. Now, we've mostly moved on from the McCarthy era of communism bad, and we're talking about more things than just that, but the height of the Soviet Union was definitely the McCarthy era. And so it's tough to suss out a lot of the situation there without sort of delving into, well, what did the American populace think at this point in time? Because that's most of the people I talk to. So, very, very seldom do I get to talk to somebody who has even secondhand testimony from inside the Soviet Union in a period of any sort of grace, not towards the end. Because things certainly got dismal. But, like I said, that wasn't something that was unique to the Soviet Union. The U.S. engaged in the war in Vietnam following the war in Korea, which was at least slightly justified. Depends who you ask. But I think it's not hard to say that the war in Korea was more justified than the war in Vietnam. And at least you could say we actually did something in Korea, other than get people killed. However, North Korea's still there, so what did we really do? They also still have one of our ships, so there's that. It's a lot of grass. It's a lot of grass. So, I mean, things did kind of fall apart. Maybe it was the LSD. Maybe it was the leaded gas. Read about that, because it's really interesting. That caused the downfall of American society. Not into the way we know it today, but into the 90s. Now, there are various proponents and, whatever the opposite of proponent is, to the theory of the leaded gas poisoning the air and making the Utes more violent. But it's an interesting thought, at least. It is hard to point to, well, what did make people more violent, or what did make people more power-hungry, or whatever. But to wrap it back around to the Soviet Union, to look at the end of the Russian Civil War, I guess you could call it, or the Russian Revolution is really what I'm talking about. It's a revolution if it succeeds. It's a civil war if it fails. It's, what's the word? If they succeed, they're powerful revolutionaries. And if they fail, they are dirty rebels. Anyway, they're rebel scum. Stop right there. So, okay, where was I? I'm trying to come back to this. The architecture that was put in place by the Bolsheviks was heavily authoritarian. Not saying that it didn't change from there, because it definitely did, and it wasn't like, oh well, we're at this now, guess we gotta deal with this. It wasn't originally what the Russian people wanted. It's what the Russian people got, but they certainly weren't campaigning for the Bolsheviks. When the revolution started, the Bolsheviks came in, they wrested control of the revolution, and they aimed it the way they wanted to. They were also the suppliers of the revolution for the most part, so that may have contributed a little bit. The formerly Entente forces, what we would know as, of as the Allies, but they were the Entente, because this is the First World War, were actually mostly supplying the Russian White Army, which lost, but, that's how a lot of this, that is how the rest of the world viewed this revolution. Most people in the rest of the world really didn't want it to happen, because it was disturbing this balance of power that had been in place for a while, and also, at the same time, you had relatively powerful people that wanted things to return to the way they were so they could remain relatively powerful. The Russian Revolution is a whole mess, and you can look at the situation with it on the Great War Channel. They've been doing updates about that. On the follow-on to World War I. It was interesting for me to find out that the Entente powers supplied the White Russians, but it makes sense when you consider that, the Western world really didn't. They didn't dig it. They didn't dig the revolutions. They didn't really want to see communism rise like it did, or socialism, or whatever. Was it because they had some sort of sixth sense and they knew it was going to go wrong? Probably not. it was probably more like, this is something new and different, and we really don't want to mess with it. Because they didn't know how it was going to turn out. Turned out poorly. But whose fault really is that? Well, it's probably not the Ententes. But it's easy to just point fingers left and right. It's easy to just lay the blame on the Bolsheviks for communism going wrong, when really where we started was hitting the nail on the head. Greed is inherent in people, and put into what's supposed to be a perfect system with perfect people, it will mess things up. And so, the imperfections that are latent in the communistic system, coupled with the lack of an outlet for greed, the lack of ability to move up, the power-hungry individuals in charge of the country, and that includes Stalin and his paranoia. Power-hungry and paranoid. The two Ps. Also, another good CGP Grey video to watch is Rules for Rulers, which makes a lot of stuff that countries that have just had revolutions pull make a lot of sense. A lot more sense, anyway. So I'm trying to go down the list here. I mean, destabilizing forces from the West? Yeah. But how much? Who can say? Because compared to the Soviet Union, that is one thing that the West was not very good at. We were not the winners in the spy game. That's for sure. In the end, yeah, we won. But along the way, I would not say so. McCarthy was nuts, but what's the phrase? Sometimes there's a reason for it. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not going to say that he and in the many ways that he were really in any way justified. But, frankly, he was kind of an extremist. But he was deeply concerned about Soviet infiltration in the U.S., and he was right. I'm not sure if he was right because he knew the facts of the situation, or if he just happened to be right. But I would tend to lean towards the latter, because if he knew the facts of the situation, he probably would have been more effective, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with that. But, hell, I don't really know his record. There's so much that we don't know. We try to have these debates, obviously. Like I said, it is fairly one-sided. I'm talking about this thing, and nobody's responding, except once a week I get a comment or two. But, I don't know. I hope I'm doing justice this debate. I hope so. I'm doing my best. I don't know. There's a lot of there's a lot of factors. There are a lot of factors. I mean, the Russian people, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. When you're stuck between the Tsar and the Bolsheviks, there's no winning. And they had wanted a revolution. They wanted to overthrow their Tsar. They got that. And then things went downhill from there. And, like I said, maybe one of the biggest kickers. Now, I am no historian. I know some things about history. I pay attention sometimes, and I sometimes go down Wikipedia wormholes. That in no means makes me qualified to make, do not put these quotes into a documentary or into your research paper or anything. Although if you want to use that title, you can go ahead. Just credit me at the end. With special thanks to Alice D'Amelio. You're welcome, by the way. Whoever just got their PhD on that. So, and is rewatching this video for the umpteenth time to remember what I said and turn it into something that actually makes sense. So, I think, yeah, one of the underlying factors, or the deepest underlying factors, is that if you really want communism to work, you have to make it so that, basically, that you don't have to force people to do much. And how do you make that happen? I have no idea. I've got no idea. Because you either need to provide incentive for people to do things, money, or you have to force them. There are not all that many people that will just get up and do things on their own. Why? Well, people are lazy. It's another inherent quality of human beings. But you can societally train people to not be lazy. I mean, look at many Asian countries. They whip that into their kids, sometimes literally. I apologize for stereotyping, but in a good way, the people that work on these kind of things are usually extraordinarily dedicated. Asians are, that is one of the best stereotypes that they have. Of course, not like they're good at math. Well, the stereotype comes from the fact that they don't give up, they don't quit, they try harder and harder and harder until they succeed. And again, I'm saying they, and I'm being vague and generalizing. Of course, that isn't true for everybody. But it is a societal pressure in a lot of Asian countries. What is this? What do you want? Uh-oh. Get rid of this. Or not get rid of. Add grass. This is going to be a lot of area to put trees on. This is something I'm probably going to want to do off camera because it's going to cause problems. Alright, so we're over here now. Whoa, careful, careful. I just want to look at how this is going. Did we get over here? I don't think we did. So, in the early 1900s, I don't think anybody was in the position to do something like that. In the modern era, maybe a smaller country could get away with it. Somebody with fewer people and a pretty decent, GDP revenue stream, etc. And if you can motivate your people to work, that's even better, because now you don't have to worry about taking care of everybody. Or rather, you don't have to worry about fully taking care of everybody. If you're taking care of your society, you should take care of your society as a whole. But anyway, you don't want to create what's called the benefits cliff, where if you go over a certain amount of money you're making, you suddenly get less and less assistance, because now you're creating pressure for people to either lie about how much they're making, which you don't really want that, or to avoid making more. And, because sometimes those benefits are worth a lot more than the extra money you'd be getting. Now, if, consider this. If, I'm going to simplify the hell out of this. I assume most people here have heard of what I'm talking about, but I want to break it down. The benefits cliff. Say, if you make under $10,000, you get free healthcare. Now, healthcare costs $1,000. I'm saying in a year, or in a pay period, or in a year, or in a month, or whatever. The amount of time is relatively irrelevant. I'll just use a year. If you make $10,000 a year, you get free health insurance. Okay? Neat. Health insurance is $1,000 a year. So, if you get a raise of, let's say, 5%, which, that's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. If you get a 5% raise, or rather, I should say it's not crazy, because I got one at work for completing my FE exam, which was more than that, but it was like a serious promotion, not just like a raise. Whatever. If you're going to get 5% more of money at work, you're going to go from, well, let's say $10,000. If you were at the cliff, you're going to go over that. 5% of $10,000 is $500. Right? Maybe. No. Wait. 5% of $10,000. I mean, 10% would, yeah. So it's $500. Sorry, that took me a minute. I had to go through that in my head. You're gonna get $500 more. Okay, neat. So now you're making $10,500 a year or whatever. And now you have to pay for health insurance. So you're actually making $9,500 because health insurance is $1,000. You're making $10,500, but you had it for free before, and now you don't. So that has to come out of your paycheck, your money, your income. So you may be incentivized to not make, to not take that promotion, or not take the raise or whatever, because now you're going to have less money in your pocket at the end of the day. Assuming all other things are equal, that's something you don't want to create. That's something that currently exists in many places, but particularly in the U.S., because that's where I know it to be existing. Virtually any benefit that's based on income is going to end up that way. Either you have a cliff where it stops being more effective, or maybe you have to taper it off. But that's much harder to do because now you have to have an infrastructure in place for somebody paying $500 for their health insurance instead of $1,000. So you have to bill them half all the time. How do you do that? That's a hell of an accounting nightmare that you've just created. What if their raise was 2.5%, and so now they're only paying $750, sorry. So now they're paying a quarter because they're getting $750 covered, and $250 they're going to have to pay themselves. And where do you draw that line? These are things that you can come up with going down to the, going on the floor with legislators and hashing things out. Of course, that's their job to figure out where these dividing lines are, but isn't it easier just to give it to everybody? And then, then it can just come out of taxes. Well, I don't know. It's easier, maybe. Is it better? Good question. Now you've got to run all that through the overhead. You've got to run all that through the back end. And now you've got to, okay, how much of the tax money goes to this? And do we adjust taxes for this? What do we do? Where does the money come from? We're dealing with these questions right now in politics, moving forward. And we may be dealing with them in a much heavier sense, in a much more present sense, after the 2020 elections. We don't know. Depends who gets in. So, it's the kind of thing to think about. We, in the U.S. at least, we live in one of, on the subject of healthcare, we live in one of very few first world countries that does not provide it as a government-mandated service. We also live in one of the countries with the best, we have some of the best healthcare in the world. So what does that mean? Do we say, well, because we have the best healthcare in the world, it's worth people paying out of pocket for? Or do we say, well, we should get in line with everybody else, and maybe the quality for the best of the best will suffer, but at the end of the day, then everybody has health insurance that's better for everybody. What's more important there? Is there a way to do both? Is there precedent for that? These are questions. But I've gotten sort of far from the original communism topic, even though that is communistic. So I'll bring it back with this before we move on to the next question, and we can end this segment because I've been talking about this for over half the show now. So, communism's kind of a scary word. At least it is for a lot of people. And when we talk about it, we tend to think of these dismal images of the Soviet Union. Or sometimes we think of Venezuela, when the government wrested control and called it communism. When they wrested control of the oil fields and decided to use that to fund the government and to fund their social programs. Not a bad idea in and of itself, but kind of a poor thought process, tying it to a resource as fluctuatable as oil. And then ended up in this massive spiral downfall because the price of oil went down and suddenly the government had no money to do anything. And now everything's gone nuts, for lack of a better term. They've gone full Weimar Republic with the currency and everything. So, is that the thing I'm thinking of? Whatever. Point is, Germany between the two world wars had a crazy inflation thing. We think about it like that. We don't often think about, okay, but what does that mean for us right now? And, what are examples of it that we can find that aren't basically in another world, and don't very much apply to the way we are. There is no way that the U.S. is going to, become a communist dictatorship, or even a communist democracy. It's not going to happen, And even if it were to happen, it certainly wouldn't happen overnight. How do you do that? What, do you think we're going to have a revolution? I don't think so. And sure, people can wreak havoc in the Oval Office or whatever, but we have a system of checks and balances, and Congress is supposed to do its job. We've had impeachments in the past of presidents who had gone too far. Or got sucked off. Either or. Also, just a sidebar, if you think that the government can keep anything a secret that isn't like military technology, remember that Clinton got impeached over a blowjob. He couldn't even get blown in his own office without it leaking to the entire world. I don't think that we can have very many secrets anymore. Certainly not in this era. Anyway. What was I saying? Yeah, so to come around to the point I was trying to make, we live in a world of socialized things. We may not think of it like that, but the roads we drive on are taxpayer funded. We pay into the big piggy bank in the sky, and the government says, okay, we're gonna build you some roads now. Same thing with fire departments in a lot of places, or police departments in almost all places in the U.S. A volunteer fire department is still relatively common across the U.S., but that's the point I'm trying to make. It's not universal, but it's relatively common. To pay for things like fire department. If you want to get a telephone line hooked up, it's the same price, no matter how close you are to the telephone lines. Not that anybody has a home phone anymore. I do. But the fact of the matter is, we subsidized that a long time ago because we realized telephone's really important. I mean, we pay taxes for a lot of things that we see the benefit of. And that's socialism. I mean, education. A lot of people take private school or go to private school instead, but not everybody. We still have a fairly robust, complain about it all you want, fairly robust public education system in this country. And I made it through, so there's that. I know it's anecdotal, doesn't mean much, but I just wanted to say it. So there are things that we don't necessarily think about as being communism that surround us. We're surrounded. Panic. Soviet Union aside, it's good to not treat it like a boogeyman. Approach all these things with some sense and some thought. These issues are far too complicated for them to be black and white, or for us to even break it down in the span of 2 hours. or for us to even break it down in the span of 2 weeks. This is the kind of things that we elect people to Congress for. These are the kind of things that we put people in the Oval Office for. The people that have studied their whole lives to be there, in a lot of cases. These people that actually know how to break it down. And how to compromise with the people that break it down differently. That's what politics is all about. People complain about politicians playing a game, but it really is a game. You see, what I think is right, and what you think is right, might not be right. And it's up to everybody else to figure that one out. It's up to us to, decide it for ourselves, but at the end of the day, people are going to disagree, and when we have to live together, which we do, you got to find something that makes everybody equally happy, or at least equally unhappy. So anyway, that said, TrainMan05 Matthew Bacon says, KS1 hasn't responded on Discord yet, so yeah. So, that's a shame. I would really like to know what's wrong with this engine. If anybody wants to go on Discord, if anybody wants to go on the download station and download this engine. This is what it's called. It's a Hudson. It says Gilson Eastern on it. It's kind of nice. The model is not great, but it's nice that it exists. So, if anybody wants to go online on the download station and download that and tell me if it works, I would really appreciate that. Try it in different versions too. I should try and download it in 2019 and see what happens. Because I really would like to get to the bottom of this, because now it's vexing me. Now, it was concerning to me before because it's supposed to just work out of the box. But if it wasn't for that person, then there must be something wrong, And maybe if it was just that person, it's something that they did, or it's something up with their trains. But I wouldn't think that's the case. Or trains in general doesn't necessarily doesn't tend to give just one person an unrepeatable issue. Can it sometimes? Yeah, it can happen. But it doesn't all the time. And it doesn't most of the time. Bugs are bugs because they're an issue with the code or, whatever. Generally, when we get to a point where something's gone wrong, you can repeat that and make the same thing go wrong again. And you can repeat that on different computers, on different save files, whatever. Different accounts. So, we should be able to figure out what's going wrong here. If other people will report back on their findings, on their issues with this Hudson. So. Now, I'd like to turn our attention to Volvos for just a minute, because Madison has made a mistake. Madison recently bought a new car, which that's not the mistake in and of itself, because it's nice. It's a 2003 Acura something or other. It's blue. It goes fast. It's pretty nice on the inside. It's got a really, really well-kept black leather interior, which of course is going to burn the hell out of us in the summer, but it's pretty nice in the wintertime. She wanted a cloth interior, which I totally respect, because I like cloth interiors. And she wears skirts and her legs stick to the seats, and that's not great. And it'll also just friggin' burn you, because black leather. But, oh well, you can't always get what you want. Here we are. She was taking me to work the other day. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, I think it was. And she made a mistake. See, we pulled up behind a car which had one of the special license plate backgrounds on it. Now, it's a pretty nice, I believe it's the Prudence Island Lighthouse or something like that on this license plate. It's a cool plate. I kind of wish I had one that was in that style, but I didn't feel like spending the extra dough to get my plates reprinted, because all of my plates have either been the antique plates, which they're their own style, or plates I've inherited. So, yeah. We pulled up behind this plate. She made mention of it. I was like, no, it's not a vanity plate, because that's what She asked if it was a vanity plate. So no, it's not a vanity plate, it's just a regular license plate background. She also has never had to pick out license plates because she just got hers from her parents. It's something that most Rhode Islanders won't do, as a matter of fact, because license plates are a point of pride around here. We're weirdos. The license plate 7, just the number 7, auctioned for $35,000, and if you own the plate, that's 9/10 of the registration. I got a drink real quick. So, the plate being what it is, she said, this is where the mistake occurred, wouldn't it be cool if you had a vanity plate? And I was like, Because, and she knows this, I don't really want to spend money on a vanity plate. I've tossed around the idea before, and I've even gone through and looked up various vanity plate options that I would do. There are 2 spellings of horseman that I could go with. There is PRRGG1, that's available. BM3713, that's also available. We only get 6 characters. Actually, I'm not sure if I can do 3713 because it's only the last 3 that can be numbers. So PRRGG1 is available. Anyway. She said, you can get a new car if you can afford the car and any repairs that need to be done to it and a vanity plate. I don't know how expensive she thinks vanity plates are, but compared to the price of a car, they're not much. They're just more year to year because you have to pay for a special registration because it's a vanity plate. And I didn't say you made a mistake. In fact, I haven't even told her that she has yet, although she might be able to hear me now. She's only in the other room. No, she didn't say anything, so I don't think she can hear me. I don't want to do a vanity plate because it's extra money. Why would we spend that much money? But if it means getting a Volvo Turbo wagon, then I will absolutely spend more money on a vanity plate. Because it comes with a huge perk, which is she doesn't get to get mad at me when I show up in the driveway with this thing and the vanity plate bustin'. BUSTIN, which is 100% available, for the record. Or PRRGG1 with this thing painted up in Tuscan red with the 4 gold stripes. So, wouldn't that be dope? I would do it in secret, so that she cannot object in the meantime. This is the thing. This is the key to a successful relationship. When you're making a big purchase, like a new car, you should go behind your SO's back and not tell them you're doing it, especially if they don't want you to do it. If you're done with it, if it already happened, what are they going to say then? Pro tip, don't follow that advice. Obviously, I would bring it up before I went through with this whole thing. That's a lot of money to spend, we'd need space in the driveway, and it would be on our insurance, so it would cost more money. So, obviously, what I said is mostly a joke. I'm not going to just show up with this thing one day with a cool paint job and a funny license plate. However, I will hold this against her. I will make mention of this fact that she said that I could have it under these circumstances, and I should I should get it in writing. I should totally get it in writing. That's a good point. Self. But, just as everything, if I screw my job up, she gets to throw me right in the gulag, so. I'm just kidding, she's not that paranoid, and I'm the one who does the gulagging around here. Anybody who's in the Discord knows that. And they also know that if I say I'm getting the document out, run for cover. Because that means something's about to happen. Usually. See, I am a responsible SAR, or dispatcher, or whatever. And when I gulag somebody, I make note of it in a document. That way I can keep record of the prisoners. And I keep record of what they were thrown in for. Because that way people know what not to do. See, it started off with me throwing people in Gulag for a bunch of relatively ancillary crap, sometimes just for fun, when we were testing out the settings on the Discord. So, it was like, alright, I should probably write these down, because in the future, since we don't have like a rules pane when you come in the future, if somebody's like, what do I do? They can get pointed at that document. And it won't tell you what to do, but it'll sure as hell tell you what not to do. And some of the stuff, again, is pretty absurd. Like, there's one in there that's just, quote, here comes the Silverton, because people kept writing that out, and in order to make an example, or in order to get people to stop, I made an example of a certain individual who shall not be named, although his name is synonymous with delicious meat from a pig, and his first name is Matthew. So, yeah, that was that. I made an example out of him. He probably, maybe, might not have been the perfect target for that, or the best target for that, I should say. But it worked. It got people to shut up. And there were other cases where I made an example out of people, because they were causing a ruckus, and I needed it to stop. And then there were other times where people actually broke the rules, like the rules in the guest list saying, you don't post anything there except for news articles. News articles with links, for that matter. Or the unspoken rules of be civil, don't be racist, that sort of thing. These things that you don't think you have to say out loud, but it turns out you kind of do. And then there are some other ones which get mentioned here and there, like more than 5 pictures is called a dump, and it goes to the photo dump group and not in the main chats or anything. So, it's that sort of important stuff. That gets cataloged. Oh, my hands are hurting. So, the whole thing with... So I went on the treadmill, like I said. And then I immediately came over and started doing this, because I only have so much time in the day. And I had to run out and run errands before I came home, so this got done a little bit later than usual. It's still Thursday. But I got started with it at about 9:30, so I'm going to be done at about 11:30. And then I got to make my sandwich, and then I got to go to bed. So, I won't say I'm looking forward to that, and I'm definitely not saying that I'm looking forward to waking up tomorrow morning. But, on the bright side, I got home, I, was able to get my daily and everything like that, get my computer booted up, because it rebooted after about 31 days. So there's that. Yeah, let's see. What is the uptime now? Performance. Uptime, 19 hours. So, that is it since it last rebooted. So it rebooted at 11 o'clock. So it rebooted at about 2 a.m., which is when I expect it to. 2 a.m. on Wednesday night, which actually, that is when it's supposed to do it. Actually, I think it might also supposed to be doing it Tuesday night. I would prefer Tuesday to Wednesday. Actually, did I even touch my computer yesterday? Well, uptime 19 hours indicates that it was last night. So anyway. That was weird. Gosh, things are just getting so far apart now. What is our last comment before I get too distracted? Marty Robbins says, also about the sports teams, why not do what every high school does and call them Spartans and pull a free Shutterstock image and put it in the texture for a football field? That'd be kind of funny. Oh yeah, what was the town I was looking for the name of? Oh, the Akron Spartans. That's not bad. I'll keep that in my back pocket. I don't mind it. It's not super special, but it's good enough. And you're right, Spartans is a pretty generic and regular team name. Unless you're talking about the new DMAG Spartans, which... Nah. That doesn't fit it at all. if we wanted to call the team the Strippers, how about the Lewinskis, since we were talking about that? Now, oh god, what did Monica Lewinsky come up in recently? It was in an episode of The Masked Singer. Does anybody here listen or watch The Masked Singer? I quite like that show. It's something that Madison got me into. I was never into these kind of, like, American Idol type, you know, that you go on stage and sing and get judged. I never cared for them. Mostly because I just didn't care. And I still don't, but the costumes are super cool. Like, the thing is, with The Masked Singer, you're supposed to guess who's under the mask. And usually the judges will be like, oh, it's so-and-so. And I'll be like, that sounds like a reasonable guess. And in my head I'm going, who the heck is that? Because I don't know celebrities and I never have. Like, I look over and I gauge Madison's interest. Uh-oh, here she comes. Oh wait, yeah, here she is. I look over and I gauge Madison's interest and I'm like, is this a person that I should know the name of? I'm talking about The Masked Singer and how I don't know celebrities at all. Do you need me to put that on for you? Is that why you came over here? Alright, well give me a second. So... where are you going? Go back. Just give me a second and then I'll do it. So... yeah, I love this show though because the costumes are so inventive, and then they come out with like the one celebrity name that I do know, and I'm like, oh, but what if it is that person? Every once in a while it's like, is it like Martha Stewart? And I'll be like, it would be the best thing if it was Martha Stewart underneath the like monster mask singing Juice. And I mean, also I love the covers, you know? It's, I don't know. I really do appreciate it. Are you okay? Hold on. I can't get it because it's over here. Hold on. Yeah.
He's trying to put my medical bracelet back on, for those of you who don't know.
Oh, my hands are all sweaty. There you go. Knees weak, arms spaghetti. But yeah, that's my... If you can call it reality TV, I don't know what else you would call it. Game show, I guess? But it's not really a game, is it? I want to know what that genre is now. Or what do you call it? Whatever. It's that kind of show. You know, singers and it's a performance show. Performance and judging. Is it a sport? No, not really. I wouldn't call it a sport. What makes something a sport? Here, these are my definers for a sport, and this may fly in the face of a lot of people, because they'll be like, well, then means this isn't a sport, and I'll be like, yeah, you're right, it's not a sport, it's an activity. That's the difference. A sport, in a sport, you have to use something to score points, and you have to be able to play defense. That's what I'm calling a sport, and that's something I took from somebody else, I can't remember who, but that is the sports criteria for me. Or definitely a sport, because things are arguable, blah, 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 blah. Battle of the Bands, band competition, is that a sport? No, I don't think it's a sport. Why is it not a sport? Because you can't play defense. You can't be interfering with another band's performance. There's nothing in the rule book that lets you do that. And I'm sure there's plenty that in the rule book that prevents it, at any rate. So, you can't do that. Is gymnastics a sport? Unless you can knock over the other cheerleader's tower, then no. That's an activity. Or an event or something, you know? I don't know. I wouldn't call it a sport. I don't think, whatchamacallit, like, target shooting is a sport unless you can shoot the other guy. Or shoot the other guy's target. You know? If there's a way you can prevent your opponent from gaining points, that's defense, that's a sport. Anyway, that's what I think. I know that's controversial, and I know it's, kind of wrong, but I think it's a nice, it's a conversation starter, or a conversation sparker, anyway. It is the kind of thing where you say that and people go, wait, hold on a minute. You know? It's not like a troll thing, I would say, but it is very much a, hold up. Like I said, it's a conversation starter. Or enticer. And it usually leads to things that are fairly entertaining, because it will go very quickly from what isn't a sport to what can you make a sport by adding defense, and how do you add defense to it. Like, you know, with you know, shooting clay pigeons or something. I wouldn't necessarily call it defense if it is you're both shooting at the same clay pigeon and whoever hits it. But I would call it defense if only one person can score off that. You know, if it gets knocked down by person A, then they get a point. But if it gets shot by person B first, then person A does not get a point. Person B doesn't, because it's their turn on defense. But person B will get a chance to try and score on it, or, you know, they'll swap positions later. Or maybe person B works the thing that fires the clay pigeons. That's a thought. That's how we turn sport shooting into an actual sport. I don't know. What do you guys think? What is a non-sport by that definition, and what can you do to it to make it an actual sport? What's you know, how would you make Battle of the Bands a sport? What sort of defense can you play in Battle of the Bands? You know, obviously they're not actually battling. Although you could say that maybe they're actually battling. Maybe they're not playing music anymore. Maybe they're just attacking each other with the instruments. I don't know. Maybe. But that's still not a sport, because you're not defending anything. Maybe one group is trying to play, and they have people fending off members of the other band who are trying to show up and mess with the thing. That counts. That's good. That's a sport, I guess. Yeah, if there is a way to prevent other people from scoring points yourself, then you've got defense. Although I suppose the analogy of two people shooting at the same clay pigeon, you're preventing the other person from scoring points. That counts as defense. I suppose that works. I'm not sure. What do you guys think? I know if you got through the hour-long communism discussion, then you're here, and we're talking about what isn't a sport. And if you actually got this far and decided to respond to this, I will be mightily impressed. I'm sure a lot of people will tune out when they hear communism brought up, but I hope some people stick it out, not just because they want to stick it out, but because they think that I'm doing something justice. I would hope. That is my hope. I would like to try to be, if not impartial, at least open. You know, open to it. I think it's this way, but it could be this way. You know, I could be wrong. That's always the shadow of doubt that I'm trying to cast over the things that I'm saying, because I think it's better that way. You know, I'm not infallible, certainly, and nobody else is either. So when I'm here, pulling stuff out of my brain with no references, you know, just coming up with stuff on the fly and thinking through these things and even coming up with new conclusions on the fly, different from what I maybe thought an hour ago. Because, I mean, that whole thing with the technological advancement of the Soviet Union playing a part in how communism manifested itself in the country, that's kind of a big deal, I think. Again, that's research paper worthy. People have probably written books on it, but I haven't read any of them. So, you know, it is what it is. I say that a lot. Yeah, I'm trying to cast the shadow of a doubt because it's worth it. It's worth casting. It's worth saying. It's worth reminding that don't take what I say necessarily at face value. Take what I say and think about it. because that's the best that we can do. That's what we've got. We are in an era where it almost feels like we're encouraged not to think about it. You read the headline and you go, wow, such and such did such a horrible thing. Or, wow, good job, individual. Or, wow, that game looks really bad. Something like that. Or really good. You know, we're in the information era, but people sometimes say we're in like the post-truth era. Because it no longer matters what the truth really is. You can put out a headline and people will read it and people will accept it. That's not good. How true that is? No idea. It was just a headline I read. But I don't want that to be the case. That was irony. Just gonna say that. That was not me. I don't mean that honestly. I don't. But we want to be able to have these discussions. We want to be able to think about the things that we're presented with in the modern era, in the modern world. And we want to be able to make educated decisions on them, not just for what's best for us, but what's best for the people around us, too. I feel like it's important. So, at the end of the day, I think it's just important to think. And we have grass all the way from one side to the other. It's not all done, it's not all there, but it is all the way. And that is a huge breakthrough, and I'm glad that we spent the entire episode today talking about communism and growing grass, which could probably be a metaphor, but I can't give you one right now, so I'm just going to leave you with that. And maybe I'll make a grass hammer and sickle somewhere, just for fun. At the end of the day, I'm just a person talking about stuff. Don't take what I'm saying to heart. If I don't agree with you or you don't agree with me, it's not a big deal. If you don't agree with me and you want to talk about it, absolutely, let's talk about it. Anybody that's listening to this can hop on to the Iron Horseman Discord and talk to me anytime. Most anytime. When I'm sleeping, I'm not very talkative. When I'm at work, I am probably more talkative than I should be, but I'm not super talkative, especially if I'm busy. When I am sitting here, doing not much, I'm pretty talkative. Not that I have time to do not much these days, but most of the day I'm at work, and you'll get a response out of me. Not that I should be encouraging that. Don't, just do stuff at work. I've been avoiding doing that stuff lately because, frankly, I need to get more work done. I have received praise for my work, and in the back of my mind I'm like, yeah, but think of what I could do if I actually paid attention. So, there are a lot of people out there with a lot of different viewpoints. I'm sure of the handful that have stuck around for this long, you're all very different people with very different backgrounds and very different thoughts on what I've said. And I'd love to hear all of them. And on top of that, you're also very similar. We're very similar. We're all people. I won't say we're all humans because, well, like I said earlier, I don't want to be, uninclusive, exclusive, but not really exclusive. Uninclusive to the, the robots that are going to be watching this in just a few short years, who I look forward to meeting, and I'm very excited about and pleased about, as a matter of fact. So, to all of the people out there, humans, AI, non-humans, whoever's listening, we have a lot more in common than we do at face value. We all are living for very similar things, and we're all living for ourselves and for each other. We're all governed by the same emotions and live in the same world. And I don't want anyone here to forget that. When you hear about people that having a tough time, Think about your own tough times. Think about how you would feel. Think about how they feel. And when you're in conversation with people, take a step back. It's worth it for your relationship with the people around you to make sure you remember that there are people around you. Anyway, that's your daily dose of Mr. Rogers, which of course I cannot do justice to, but you should go see his movie, and you should tune in next time, and leave a comment, and all that jazz. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you next week. This is the Admiral, signing off.